Have you ever looked at your life and thought, man, I'm just ordinary? Like you've just drifted through an uninspired existence, accumulating regrets, and wondering what the point of it all really was? Well, today we're diving straight into a deeply emotional explainer of Mitch Albom's profound text, The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. We are going to unpack a beautifully crafted narrative that forces us to completely rethink our relationships, our deepest regrets, and the hidden earth-shattering purpose behind our everyday actions. Honestly, it plays out like a cinematic documentary of the human soul, and it is going to absolutely change the way you view your own life.
To really grasp this, we actually have to start at the very end. We drop right into the visceral sights, the smells of cotton candy, and the crashing sounds of the great gray ocean at Ruby Pier, an amusement park. The author establishes this beautiful paradox right off the bat. All endings are also beginnings. We just don't know it at the time. Enter our protagonist, Eddie. He's an 83-year-old maintenance worker. Picture a squat, barrel-chested old guy with a ruined knee from the war, just wandering the boardwalk with this heavy ring of keys hooked to his belt. He feels completely unimportant, but today, on his 83rd birthday, Eddie is about to make the ultimate sacrifice.
The tension built here is just masterful. A brand new drop tower ride at the pier malfunctions. A frayed cable, which, mind you, was slowly husked apart by a dropped car key months prior, suddenly snaps. The carts go into a dead drop. Eddie screams, "Get back!" and lunges. But he doesn't lunge for his own safety. He throws himself forward to save a little girl whose pipe cleaner rabbit he had literally just made for her minutes ago. Pushing off his bad leg, ignoring the absolute agony, he feels 2 small hands in his own, right before a stunning impact, a blinding flash of light, and then nothing. His earthly existence is over.
So what happens next? You're probably picturing fluffy clouds and harps, right? Well, the source material brilliantly redefines the afterlife. Heaven isn't some lush paradise garden where you just float around forever, because, honestly, scenery without solace is kind of meaningless. Instead, heaven is presented as a place where you are guided by 5 specific people who finally explain the meaning of your life. It's the profound, desperately needed opportunity to make sense of your yesterdays.
To ground all these big, ethereal lessons, the text uses this really clever recurring timeline of Eddie's birthdays back on Earth. At age 5, he's playfully flipped upside down by a family friend. At age 7, he's thrilled to get a new baseball. At 8, he's miserable, forced to wear a stifling suit to a pier worker's funeral. These seem like totally random, insignificant childhood moments, don't they? But actually, they carry immense hidden weight. They're literally the building blocks of his destiny, and heaven is about to reveal exactly why.
So, Eddie wakes up, but he's not an 83-year-old man anymore. He's in a young, limber body, back at the Ruby Pier of his childhood, and this is where he has his very first heavenly encounter. He meets a sideshow performer named the Blue Man, a guy whose skin was literally turned blue by silver nitrate poisoning. And the Blue Man looks at Eddie and asks this really profound rhetorical question. Why do people gather when others die? Why are we inexplicably drawn to the funerals of people we barely even know?
And the answer he gives, it's a total gut punch, because the human spirit knows, deep down, that all lives intersect. The Blue Man teaches Eddie that there's simply no such thing as a random act. Life is so perfectly balanced that you can no more separate one life from another than you can separate a breeze from the wind. We are all deeply, intricately, and permanently connected to one another.
To put this interconnectedness into perspective, think about 2 totally different perspectives of the exact same split second in time. Remember Eddie's 7th birthday with that new baseball? Well, from one side, we see a young Eddie safely grabbing his baseball from a rainy street and happily running off to play at the arcade. But what Eddie didn't see was the man driving a Ford Model A who swerved in a panic to miss him, crashed into a desolate alley, and died of a heart attack brought on by the massive adrenaline spike. That driver was the Blue Man. The shocking, devastating truth is that Eddie's survival directly caused the Blue Man's death.
You'd think Eddie would be crushed by the guilt of this, believing he needs to somehow pay for his sin. But in heaven, Eddie realizes something wild. His physical and emotional agony, it's completely gone. Where is my worry? Where is my pain? He wonders. The Blue Man gently explains that fairness just doesn't govern life and death. If it did, no good person would ever die young, right? The Blue Man's death wasn't a waste, simply because Eddie lived. It's such a powerful lesson in finally releasing our earthly guilt.
Moving right along, Eddie's journey shifts into his young adulthood. At 17, he experiences the absolute pure innocence of true romance, dancing the night away with the love of his life, Marguerite. But that innocence, It's abruptly and violently shattered by war. By age 24, he's fighting for his life in the unforgiving Philippine jungles. And his very next birthday, he's recovering in a grim VA hospital. His leg is shattered, his spirit is totally broken, and that youthful innocence is gone forever.
Suddenly, Eddie is whisked away to a smoldering, war-torn terrain. And here, he meets his second person, his former military captain. This guy was a lifetime military man, full of this lanky swagger who somehow kept their unit together through months of horrific, starving captivity in a coal mine. And the way he did it was by making his men believe in one simple, unbreakable promise: no one gets left behind.
The cinematic intensity of their escape sequence is just raw, harrowing adrenaline. Eddie, acting on pure instinct, juggles rocks to distract their captors, triggering a brutal fight for freedom. They actually manage to break out and start torching the enemy camp with flamethrowers. But in the absolute chaos and madness of war, Eddie hallucinates a small child's shadow inside a burning hut. He stubbornly refuses to leave the collapsing, flaming structure until, out of nowhere, a bullet violently tears through his leg, forcing him into the dirt. For his entire adult life, Eddie bitterly believed he was shot by a random enemy soldier, a wound that left him crippled and trapped working at Ruby Pier forever. But here comes a breathtaking twist. The captain looks right at him and reveals the truth. "I was the one who shot you." The captain fired that bullet to stop Eddie from burning alive in that hut. He kept his promise. "I took your leg," he tells a stunned Eddie, "to save your life."
It totally flips the idea of sacrifice on its head, doesn't it? The captain's core lesson is that sacrifice is not about losing something precious, it's about passing it on to someone else. It's not something to bitterly regret, it's something to aspire to. And the captain proved this in the most profound way possible. Because just moments after shooting Eddie to save him, the captain stepped on a landmine while clearing the path for their escape vehicle. He literally gave his life so Eddie could live.
Next, the explainer pivots away from the smoldering battlefields to a deeply psychological space, a stark, snowy, isolated mountain diner. And this is where it gets incredibly emotional. Eddie is forced to confront the deepest, most agonizing wounds of his earthly life, the scars left by his father. These scars were inflicted in 3 distinct, painful stages. First, the damage of neglect. Then, the damage of physical violence. And finally, the worst of all, the silent, absolute denial of affection.
Imagine standing outside that diner in heaven, looking through the frosted glass, and seeing your father sitting right there in a booth. Eddie bangs on the glass, screaming with this desperate, visceral ache, "Dad! Dad! Dad!" But nothing. Even in heaven, Eddie is completely ignored. The man never even looks up. It is an incredibly painful, cinematic reflection of a childhood spent desperately seeking just a tiny shred of approval from a man who only ever offered deafening silence and a harsh backhand.
There's this absolutely beautiful, crushing metaphor used here to capture this dynamic. Youth, like pristine glass, absorbs the prints of its handlers. Some parents smudge that glass, others crack it, and some just shatter childhoods completely. Yet the ultimate tragedy is that children will foolishly adore their parents through even the most toxic behavior. Eddie absorbed all the smudges and cracks his father laid upon him, and it shaped his entire adult life, turning him into a hardened, emotionally distant man.
So, what does this all mean when we pull these deeply emotional threads together? Well, we realize the profound beauty of Albom's overarching message. Eddie spent 83 years believing his life was a total waste, just a trap of circumstance. But through the Blue Man, the captain, his father, and the others waiting for him, we see that Eddie's seemingly unimportant life was actually a beautiful tapestry of sacrifice, protection, and unseen impact on literally thousands of strangers. As the Blue Man perfectly put it, the only time we waste is the time we spend thinking we are alone.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought that I really hope stays with you long after we're done here. Look at your own life, the one you might think is just ordinary. If every life truly intersects, whose story are you already a part of without even knowing it? Realize that your everyday actions, your small sacrifices, your unseen kindnesses, they are rippling into eternity right now. Thank you so much for joining me on this deeply reflective journey today, and I'll see you next time.